Since its release in October of 2019, the PowerA Fusion Pro controller has held the title here at GamerHeaven for worst rear paddle design with a clutterly, there's your word of the day, utterly clumsy rear button design that would eat away at the plastic. Its successor, the Fusion Pro 2, hiked the price $10, added USB-C, a share button, and a little audio control block for the 3.5mm jack, but at its core was the same janky Pro controller. Then to dip into the Nintendo market, they released a Switch Pro controller, which is also reviewed on the channel and unfortunately was plagued with the same successor rear end. But PowerA has just pulled one of the biggest comeback stories I've ever seen in the Pro controller market with the PowerA Fusion 3, making some substantial changes from its two predecessors. Getting rid of the 4 massive canoe paddles in place for 4 rear buttons that are sunken with the rear shell and can be remapped on the fly. Granted, it doesn't stay in remapping mode. The 3-way trigger stops still do absolutely nothing, and all the components feel like they were sourced from Toys R Us before they went out of business, but this is a substantially better gamepad, and at $80 with a 2-year warranty and 4 milliseconds of input lag or delay on PC, this ain't a bad buy, not by a long shot, as were the previous 2 versions were the laughingstock of the Pro controller world. So I'm very curious if PowerA is still giving out free fishing supplies, free weights for the tackle box inside of this controller. Without further ado, kick your friggin' feet up in the foyer and enjoy the video.
This is your controller captain. We've reached 6,900 feet. Go ahead and start flicking the sticks and mollywopping the back paddles.
You don't like back paddles? How about those rear buttons? We've tested almost 100 custom and premium controllers and we're only at the beginning. You need a thumbstick guide or a tutorial on how to overclock your controller? Check out the controller playlist. Bing bong.
Controller captain out.
As for the packaging and included accessories on PowerA's Fusion Pro 3, I'm expecting a very visually appealing box, as there's always been some very corny stimulating graphics on all the PowerA boxes. You can see a little bit of that peeking out from the inner box here. Just because this is a licensed product does not mean that PowerA owns the licensing to Xbox Wireless, and because of that, them not having the licensing for that protocol, that communication protocol, this is going to be a wired-only controller. Repeat, a wired-only controller, which you do see a lot more of on the Xbox platform versus the PlayStation platform, and because of that, the aftermarket of third-party controllers for the Xbox is littered and somewhat oversaturated with a lot of shitty gamepads, some good gamepads, a few great gamepads, as opposed to the PlayStation side of the house, where there's very few cheap, generic, nameless, brandless controllers because they just won't pair up to the PlayStation, even though it uses Bluetooth 5.1 as its communication protocol. Kevin, unbox that damn controller. I've been waiting on this review for months. You're right, me too. If you wanted to pause the box to read some of the key features, you may do so now, and the other one, and the undercarriage, and a look up top side. You are going to have 3 clear wafer stickers that need sliced. Your outer sleeve is going to slide to the side like that. You are going to see your carrying case, and you are going to be greeted with a ton of graphics on the inner box, which also extends to your documentation envelope as well. Nothing underneath the plastic tray, and if you want to get a good look at those graphics, now is a good time to bask in all of that glory. All your documentation is going to be in this one graphicked up envelope, and I love to see that it's been simplified into one piece of documentation. English is the first and primary language, good font, large color diagrams and breakouts, all the functions of the controller, and I'd have to say this is actually a pretty good instruction manual, although PowerA's always done the instruction manuals proper. And as per usual, you are going to have a couple of dirt nasty stickers here if you want to sticker bomb the front of your PC tower or maybe the rump of your car just to let people know, hey man, I'm a gamer, RGB for days. And then you have the pièce de résistance, which is going to be inside of this carrying case, and I will say just immediately, this is a very light controller. It is wired, so you would assume not having that wireless chipset, it is going to be rather light, but its predecessor, the PowerA Fusion Pro 2, which used lead weights, basically fishing sinkers, throw them in your tackle box, in each palm grip, which I thought was absolutely ridiculous. I called that out as a somewhat sneaky, vindictive practice, considering it's blatantly there to fool the customer into thinking this is a hefty controller, fantastic build quality, they must be using some rich plastics and whatnot. There's metal weights in the palms. That was silly. Decent carrying case, a good amount of support. I actually can't press down on the analog sticks. I also like the looks of it. You have the blacked out Fusion lettering here. You do have a metal pull tab with a little bit of orange trim around the zipper track. Let's get this bad boy open. And it looks almost virtually indistinguishable from the PowerA Fusion Pro 2. So if you were a fan of that controller, cosmetically. Also something I love to see, PowerA has learned from their mistakes and also the mistakes of a lot of other controller manufacturers. Now the USB-C cable is directly in front of the thumbstick caps rather than right on top of them, cocking them out at a weird angle, speeding up the problem of stick drift before the gamepad even gets to you. In this top net, you do have a little bit of Velcro, and this is going to hold 2 thumbstick cap options as well as your USB-C cable, which does have a separate Velcro strap for that. Damn, as for the included USB-C cable, I am extremely impressed. It is very lightweight, not very flexible, but I'm sure it will break in, but incredibly lightweight. It almost reminds reminds me of Razer's HYPR cables, I believe they call them. They have some kind of a marketing gimmick name for them, but they're very light cables attached to their wired mice. Also good this is USB-C. It'd be weird if we backtrack to micro USB. No dust covers on the USB-C or A end, but overall a very high quality cable, and you do have a Velcro tieback. What the hell? We have got to talk about these thumbstick caps because they're weird. And as for included thumbstick caps, you are going to have the two short concaved options pre-installed, and you are going to have a high concave as well as a high dome stick. The dome stick is freakishly weird. I've never seen anything like it before. You have these large bumps or dots around the outside, and then a very small smooth center section. More on these later during the thumbstick section. As for the cosmetics and appearance, what's not to like? This is a very simplistic, minimalistic design, blacked out, very similar to the Elite Series 2, and sure enough, its successor. Not to get into comfort too much, but this rubberized soft touch material on the faceplate feels fantastic. I do like the face buttons with the individual lettering on the center. Not a whole hell of a lot to look at, but a very good looking gamepad in my opinion. I'm gonna give it an 8 out of 10. Repeat, an 8 out of 10. Actually, you know what? Give that a 7 out of 10. This gloss or piano black that they decided to go with on the bumper suite, not a huge fan. You already know what I'm gonna say. Fingerprints and micro scratches like nobody's business. I mean, look at that. Just schmear city up there. Also, not a huge fan of this massive cutout they have for the USB-C cable. If you're trying to use your own cable, you need to make sure that it is a pretty small housing to fit in this little trough. Good looking gamepad. The manufacturer's weight and dimensions from PowerA is going to be popping up on screen here, but as far as the actual ergonomics and comfort when you wrap your gamer icicles around the plastic haunches of this bad boy, is this bitch comfortable? Yes, substantially more so than its predecessor, and that is because the biggest issue with comfort has always been that whack-ass rear paddle design, which has been ditched for a 4 rear button design. So that pretty much summarizes comfort there, because the one major issue with comfort has now been remedied. This is now a very comfortable controller. It has that soft touch rubberized faceplate, these rubberized grips around the side and back, which feel very good. And those rear buttons are a joy as they don't cut into the comfort whatsoever. And that little diamond texturing that they have etched on the back feels phenomenal. That stippling on there. Comfort is going to be a 10 out of 10 for me. I think I just gave out a perfect score comfort-wise for the Astro C40 that I tested, and I rarely give out 10 out of 10s in the comfort section. I'm giving them out like candy here recently, because the Astro C40 and Fusion 3 here are very comfortable controllers. Hallelujah. As for build quality, I have to keep reminding myself this is an $80 controller in hand because it's actually pretty good. No major panel gaps, and that's impressive considering this does have a magnetic faceplate design, so you can pop it, swap it, and cosmetically tweak it. Yes, the plastics do feel a little bit cheap in the back, but that rubberized faceplate feels phenomenal, and none of the buttons are screaming, wow, I'm gonna break on you in a couple months. One of the biggest points of failure on the previous version of the Fusion Pro, the 2, was gonna be that paddle design because it had metal paddles and then a plastic housing which would get eaten away every time you actuated those rear paddles. And then you were gonna be SOL or shit out of luck. But now that we have 4 buttons that are flush with the rear shell or sunken in damn near flush, they're virtually impossible to break. You'd have to really try a new level of stupid to break these. Perceived build quality, I'm gonna give it a 7 out of 10. I have no issues with this controller. As for the warranty, all PowerA controllers are now carrying a 2-year warranty, which is fantastic to see considering a lot of pro controllers have a 3-6-month warranty or 1 year. So 2-year warranty on an $80 controller, not bad at all. Now in the D-pad or direction buttons department, this feels virtually identical to its predecessor. In fact, I can't feel any distinguishable difference whatsoever. About the same force to actuate, same buttery smooth actuation, and virtually silent sound. That was always a pro of mine. And I really do like the cosmetic appearance of having that little, what looks like an anti-friction ring, which doesn't make sense because it's not around the outside of the thumbstick gates, but that's what it looks like. That little glossy trim piece around it looks very nice. A nice distinct step for each 4 directions, and then a smaller gate, but still a noticeable step for each diagonal input. And for a membrane, it feels very tactile and clicky. I do like this quite a bit. I'm gonna give it a 7.5 out of 10. Repeat, 7.5 out of 10. She's a beaut. As for the face or action buttons, we don't need to spend a whole heck of a lot of time here, so don't like bust out your sleeping bag, your cot, or anything like that. We're not gonna be here for very long. Get ready to stake and go. Cosmetically, I do think these buttons look good. They're black with gray lettering, however, very glossy, and my fingerprints are already smudged all over these things, and I just got the gamepad. Same glossy trim piece that's around the D-pad and anti-friction rings, so matches the whole accoutrement. And these are serviceable. They don't feel great. They're not mechanical or anything like that. Feel and look extremely close together, noticeably closer together than other controllers that I've tested recently. Maybe that's just the placebo effect, but they sure as shit feel really close to each other. Standard Xbox sizing though. Also the same shape as Xbox controllers where it's very rounded. Actually a little bit less rounded than stock Xbox buttons, but not as flat as PlayStation buttons. 5.5 out of 10. Now as for the accessory button suite, so that's going to be the Xbox button, the pause and option buttons, as well as that lovely share button that was introduced with the Series S and X. Then you're also going to have this little niblet down here, which is going to be control for the 3.5mm headphone jack. That's going to be turning down volume, turning up volume, and then pushing it in is going to mic mute. The Xbox button looks looks insanely cheap, like this was pulled from a parts bin special, but it does feel okay. Same thing with these 3 buttons. They look very cheap, but they feel okay. And I kind of do like the looks and functionality of this little control block down here. I'm going to give the accessory button suite a 6 out of 10. Now, as for these thumbsticks, the surface material, the rubber that's making contact with your hand, does feel okay. It is relatively grippy and decently comfortable. You do have that rib design around the outside and then a smoother rubberized section in the middle, which is concaved and will let your fingers rest in them. You also have those anti-friction rings, so you will glide along smooth plastic when you're on the outside of your thumbstick gates. I do like to see that. Clicking down L3 and R3 feels about the same as every other damn controller, unless there's something crazy going on. These are freakishly short, and I'm going to go ahead and put that high dome stick on the right. In order to swap the thumbstick caps, you are going to get a finger underneath this little cutout and just simply pull up on the magnetized faceplate. Then you're able to lift off your thumbstick bases and put on your desired option. I'm going to leave the short concaved on the left, and I'm going to go with the high dome on the right because this is a very curious option. Just sits on there like that. Replace your faceplate. Something to note here, you are not going to have a secondary white faceplate that you can swap to with the Fusion Pro 3, unlike the Fusion Pro 2, which had a white faceplate option, and also the Nintendo Switch version of the Fusion Pro 2, which I have reviewed on the channel. A lot of gamers didn't really give a shit about that option. Put on the white one, throw out the black one, or just leave the black one on, throw out the white one. People don't really care that much. They'd rather save the $10. I'm a big fan of the dome stick. I didn't know what to think at first, but it does feel very good. It's grippy in the middle, however, I lose grip around the outside, around this dotted section, but cosmetically it looks really cool. How about KontrolFreeks compatibility? We're gonna breeze right over universal slip over caps because we know that those are gonna work. But as far as licensed KontrolFreeks caps, these are red Infernos for the Nintendo Switch Pro controller. And my recommendation is if you do have removable thumbstick caps, to go ahead and remove them and then pop on your KontrolFreeks so you're not putting undue pressure on your thumbstick modules. Very loose. Yeah, it just pops right off. So the 3 concave sticks have the same diameter and shape and will have the same compatibility, but we'll also test the dome stick separately. These are Omnis for Xbox One and Series. Fit perfectly. These are meant for them. These are white Galaxies for PlayStation 4 and 5, and they are going to be loose and wiggly, so Xbox is the winner chicken dinner. How about that dome stick? Let's get domed. Nintendo Switch, a little bit, yeah, definitely loose and wiggly. PS4 and 5, loose and wiggly, and Xbox One and Series fits perfectly. In fact, that actually fits snugger and more secure with the 0 side-to-side play on the dome stick. So my personal recommendation would be to rock the dome stick with a low-rise KontrolFreeks cap on top of that to give you a little bit more height, a little bit more grip, and also the shape you want. I do recommend using my exclusive discount code to checkout to get 12% off your order. Oh golly, I can't get the faceplate back on over that thumbstick cap. Ah, jeez. Put this on first. There we go, and then pop the cap on over that. Ah, God, and then we get our silver play button. Well, these thumbsticks didn't offend me. In fact, I had a great time with them here on the table, but let's plug them into Project Zero for a little bit of that technical analysis inside a gamepad tester. Over here in Gamepad Tester, a couple of things I want to make note of. If I move my face for just a second, I'm not running any kind of software programs in the background like Rewazd or DS4 Windows. Well, DS4 Windows wouldn't be the program because this is a Xbox controller, but you get my point. I'm not enhancing my thumbsticks through software, and these are the out-of-the-box results with a resting value of 0.00002, which is a perfect resting value for potentiometer thumbsticks. Also, I will say these are insanely responsive as soon as I apply just the smallest amount of input on these thumbsticks. But when I take them off, there's no chance of stick drift here as they're snapping back to that resting value. Let's test the circularity, which is going to give us our thumbstick accuracy. Is there any area where our thumbstick movement is not properly being registered? And the answer to that is going to be a resounding fuck yes. The bottom left, the top right, this red means you're dead, or potentially could be if you're in a multiplayer scenario where you're trying to aim over here and your movements are either slower than usual or your controller simply isn't registering, period. However, that generally is not going to be the case even with a 13% average error rating because these are on par with most potentiometer thumbstick modules. I have seen better. I have seen slightly worse, not much worse, but a little bit. I've had worse. That's not what you want to hear. But no out-of-the-box stick drift. These performed quite admirably, and I do love the resting value and responsiveness of these thumbsticks. I'm going to give them an 8 out of 10, which is the highest value, the highest score that I can give non-removable, permanently affixed potentiometer thumbstick modules. I say permanently affixed. You could always solder them and put in new thumbstick modules. Not very many gamers want to do that, especially on an $80 gamepad, especially if it's in spec of warranty. You probably just get a replacement. If you're planning on bumping people off with these bumpers, good luck, because I hate the way they look, I hate the way they feel, I hate the way they sound, and I hate the way they taste. We're going to address each one of those individually. First of all, you shouldn't be eating plastic because it's not edible. Second of all, cosmetically, they're glossy. They should be flat matte, like the back shell here. You can actuate them with the tips of your fingers, but you're better off using the meat of your index finger to actuate them on the sides because you have to use substantially less strength and it is faster to actuate. These are somewhat quiet, which I do like, but the sound that they do put hood off sounds incredibly cheap, chintzy, flimsy, whatever words you want to insert here for plastics that feel like crap. Yeah. Also, there's a weird angle, which you might not even be able to see on camera, but these dip down just ever so slightly, a very small degree, but they taper down just a little bit. Uncomfortable. I'm going to give the bumpers a 2 out of 10. Repeat, a 2 out of 10. Now, for all the praise of PowerA moving forward, advancing, listening to the gaming community, doing the research and development, and making changes, that did not apply to these trigger stops, as they are still utterly and completely useless and are only there for the marketing feature to put on the box. Just another bullet point, another feature to say this controller has. T3 is going to be your full trigger squeeze, so you can modulate the throttle and brake in a racing game. T2 is going to be your midway stop, which does virtually nothing. Full pull, half pull. Why? Okay. That cut out about 15 to 20% of the trigger pull, if that. I can't think of a specific application where that's even useful. You either want that full linear squeeze for racing games, or you want the shortest, perhaps mouse-like click for shooters. Speaking of that shortest click, on its lowest travel, which is T3, these cut out about 70% of the pull, leaving you 30, which is substantially more than you should have. That's a lot of dead-end slop, a lot of take-up. The only benefit to this is these triggers will register and actuate as soon as you press them, but you still have all that extra take up after you've already pressed them, which I don't like to see. But I do like the way the triggers feel. You have a good amount of resistance, good travel, and I like this little etched or diamond pattern. It feels very good on the fingertips. Trigger stops are there, but they don't do shit. Hey, a little follow-up or update to those triggers after playing with them further. My hair is looking crazy. Don't even really care. While the 3 steps have about the same physical pull of the PowerA Fusion Pro 2, they seem to actuate much quicker, making them much more effective trigger stops than the original, thus making them not useless like I was saying earlier. They're actually somewhat useful, they're just not the best trigger stops on the market, but they are an upgrade from its predecessor for sure. As for the rear buttons on the PowerA Fusion Pro 3, we're going to be talking extensively about them, but first of all I want to get the remapping protocol right out of the way. Protocol? How you remap or rebind them on the fly. I do like the fact that you can remap or bind the rear buttons on the fly, but I do have 2 complaints about the whole process. First is that you have to enter mapping mode for each one of the 4 advanced gaming buttons that they call them. They're AGLs, advanced gaming levers. So just mathematically, you have to hold down the button for 3 seconds to go into remapping mode times 4 buttons, when I could just stay in remapping mode and quickly fire off. Boom, 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 boom. You know, in like 5 seconds, and then exit remapping mode by holding down the mapping button. That's not how it works, and that's kind of funky. But in order to remap them, it is quite simple. You have to be wired, you have to be plugged into a PC or Xbox, because this is a wired-only controller. You're not getting power to it without a cable. With the controller powered on, you're going to hold down the program button for 3 seconds. You will get a white flashing LED light directly under the Xbox button. And here was my second complaint. The directions show you pictures for what to do, but literally no words, no verbiage, no instructions written out. No biggie though. That LED light will begin to flash underneath the Xbox button, then you can bind any of those buttons right there. Then sure enough, flip around the tuchus and hit the button on the back you want to bind it to. As mentioned during the intro, PowerA has held the long-running title, the award, the crown, the gold medallion if you will, for the worst rear paddle design, with the worst rear button design being shared amongst the Razor Wolverine series and the Thrustmaster eSwap X. Now I will say, if you're an owner of both of those controllers, you can adapt with various grips to become proficient and have a comfortable experience using those rear paddles or buttons. However, you shouldn't have to make such compromises. And after testing over 100 controllers with rear inputs, whether those be paddles, buttons, or half domes like Sony uses on their DualSense Edge, that's just the standing for who does it wrong. PowerA has definitely listened to the gaming community and made a massive revision to the back end or tuchus of this controller, and done one of the biggest 180s in the controller scene that I've ever seen. The biggest problem with the PowerA Fusion 1 and 2 was going to be that rear paddle design, because they weren't built to last. You had metal paddles grinding against a plastic base. They would wear down and become unusable after a couple of months or a couple of years if you're lucky. But past all of that, even when they were working, they were freakishly uncomfortable, just an ergonomic disaster, sticking way further away from the rear shell than they should, also being freakishly large and ill-shapen for what you need on the back of your controller, and yeah, I just wasn't a fan. These are a joy, except for the fact that the bottom buttons they're about a ½ inch too high for most medium to large size hands. We'll say your North American demographic of gamers. Your American gamers out there. Which I'll be the voice for, I guess. How I want to naturally hold this gamepad, my ring fingers, which should be covering the bottom buttons actually aren't. I have to hike them up, which puts me in a somewhat unnatural position because this is more cramped than I'd like. I generally like to fan my fingers out a little bit, give them a little breathing room on those grips. And you simply can't do that because, as you see, I'm not actuating these rear buttons. Now, you can use this controller with a modified grip where you cover all 4 of the rear buttons with just your middle fingers, pressing the bottom 2 with your tips and the top 2 with the meat or this middle part of your middle finger. That does work, is very comfortable, efficient, and no issues with that. However, I'd prefer to use 4 fingers for 4 buttons on this particular controller, and you just simply can't because these 2 bottom buttons are about a ½ inch too high. Not even a half, just like a 1/4 inch lower would make them more accessible. But again, one of the biggest comeback stories I've ever seen in the rear button department, going from a janky, shitty, trash rear paddle design to an awesome rear button design that is incredibly comfortable, efficient, and almost perfect if these were just a tad lower and this controller could stay in remapping mode while I bind all 4 of the rear buttons. You need a score on those rear buttons, don't you? Don't mean nothing without the numbers. I'm gonna have to give them a 8 out of 10 because the little gripes I had, the nitpicks, the areas of improvement, but overall, just a great rear button design. Now, a big question that I have, and a lot of you are gonna have down in the comment section if I don't answer it for us right here, right now, is gonna be the input lag or delay. So let's measure the polling rate or refresh rate to get that. And out of the box, I can tell you right now, it's gonna be a 250 hertz stock clock, netting you just under 4 milliseconds of input lag or delay, about a 3.9 on the first poll. We have a few outliers here, more than a few, 21 of them. So we're gonna ignore those and we're gonna run a few more polls. Excuse me. One more for safe measure. So very consistent results amongst the 3 polls, and also very consistent period with the minimum and maximum very close to each other. We got a 3 and a 9 here. Again, the closer together these are, the better consistency wise. Jitter also pretty low, and that average sure as day 3.9 while wired. I don't know why I say while wired. That's the only way you're going to be playing with this controller. Can we overclock this controller? Will it take it? Well, it is based on the Xbox platform, which is generally polling rate locked, but some third-party Xbox controllers can be overclocked, like the Victrix Gambit. Let's get it. In that naughty little folder I keep tucked away from society titled Controllers, this is where we do our overclocking on the gray market. Really, this is available to the public and it's completely legal. I do have a tutorial, guide, walkthrough, linked in the description below. In the Lord of Mice overclocking program, in this drop-down select all, pinch the corner. I like to make her a little bit bigger, expand the child name so we can see what controller we're working with. We are recognized as an Xbox gaming device not overclocked on the stock clock for 4 milliseconds of input lag or delay. That is all very accurate. It is going to be an X input controller and there is no method or option of putting it into D input. Most modern launchers and games work with X input, and that's kind of the golden standard for 2023. That Xbox gaming device is overclocked at 1000 hertz for an estimated 1 millisecond of input lag or delay. Grab you by the beaker, let's test that theory. Get your lab coat on because you're in the splash zone. Unfortunately, it does appear that it is still polling rate locked as we are still at 4 milliseconds. Run it again. That might have been operator error, me getting lazy on that left thumbstick. So we do still have that benefit of overclocking, that we are more consistent as this is even tighter with the minimum and maximum. But as far as lowering your average speed, no sir, no ma'am, you're still going to be at that sub 4 mark. And a quick and interesting note about the pricing of the Fusion Pro controller line. The original dropped in 2019 for $80. Then the sequel came out for $10 more with minimal upgrades or changes. But now this version, the 3rd version, is now back to its original MSRP of $80 and is by far the best version and carries the longest warranty. So I'm very curious if PowerA is still giving out free fishing supplies, free weights for the tackle box inside of this controller. I don't think they are. I'm going to call it right now just because this controller is so much lighter than its predecessor. 8 Phillips head screws in order to take this controller apart. Now, I'd recommend when working on any controller to have a magnetized tip screwdriver. If you don't have one of those, you can buy one of these blocks on Amazon for about $5. Will be linked in the description below. That magnetizes the tips of your tools. Also, this little toolkit will be linked in the description below as well. So I could tell immediately just from holding the controller that it was substantially lighter. It was more in the realm of the weight that it should have been at originally for being a wired controller. And now you can clearly see, I'm not even going to separate these 2 shells any further, that there is no lead weights in there or whatever metal that was. There is no weights in the palms anymore, so that is good to see. Also, the PCB is white. Interesting. Not doing a full teardown or disassembly right now. This is just the initial review. Thank you very much. Let's put this back together. Also, a quick note for the repairability, customizability of this controller. I do like the fact that these are Phillips head screws. They're all the same length, so you don't need to keep track of different lengths, and you don't need a specialized tool like a Torx T screwdriver or anything like that. So as for the verdict, this controller actually performed performed incredibly well, both on my Xbox Series X, Series S, and my Windows 10. Oh, no, I'm on 11 now. That doesn't really matter. The controller would have performed the same. You get the point. On PC and Xbox, this controller performed incredibly well. The body and shell design's virtually unchanged, but since you don't have those 4 uncomfortable rear paddles, now you have 4 rear buttons. That actually feels very good in hand. As of now, I can say PowerA went from having one of the worst Xbox Pro controllers that I've ever experienced to, honestly, not only a respectable offering, but very competitive. In fact, I will be doing a comparison in the near future of all of the wired Xbox Pro controllers, not the wireless joints. That'll be a separate video. And I am still working on that massive tier list or comparison of all the PlayStation 5 controllers. All those are going to get rattled off in direct succession. I'm going to be hammering out those videos just with my meat mallet, just hammering them out over the next few months, getting carpal tunnel from editing and whatnot. It needs to get done. Those are some big projects that are going to take days, maybe even weeks to put together. It's going to happen. When I do that wired Xbox video, I have a feeling that this will be ranked very highly, as PowerA has clearly listened to the constructive and constant criticism over the last few years and applied it to this gamepad. Love to see it and would love to see it from more controller manufacturers in the near future. Drop in the comment section below your opinion of this gamepad, or if you're a fan of the original PowerA Fusion or the Fusion 2, and I'll see you Stallions and Stallionettes tomorrow. Peace. If you enjoyed the video, liking it helps it to get seen by more gamers. This information will reach and assist them as well, which in turn helps me grow this little channel, which I do greatly appreciate. Subscribe for more content like this. I cover news in the gaming community and industry, tutorials helping you get set up streaming and YouTubing, as well as honest gaming product reviews, keyboards, mice, headsets, controllers, mics, chairs, etc. There are some hefty exclusive discount codes found only in the description of my videos and only for the audience here at GamerHeaven. I have links to all my other platforms and socials in the description below. To get in touch with myself and the Stallions and Stallionettes of GamerHeaven, join the community Discord, and check me out at twitch.tv where I go live every other leap year on a blue moon if it falls into an odd calendar number, and my pH balance is on point. Just kidding. Starting June, I'm going to be live streaming a lot. Thanks for watching. This has been AK40 Kevin hosting GamerHeaven, and I'll see you tomorrow because I upload daily. All the time. 60% of the time. Sometimes. Most of the time. Peace.